Welcome back, welcome back. A week ago, the violent Islamist group in Nigeria, Boko Haram, launched its deadliest attack so far in the northern city of Kano. 185 people were killed. It follows multiple bomb attacks by the group on Christians celebrating Christmas Day. With such a dangerous and bloody conflict, you might think that nobody would be looking to invest money in Nigeria's future. But that's exactly what Nigeria's central bank governor, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, is hoping that investors will do. He's certainly a very persuasive character. He's currently on a global tour, hoping to drum up business for Nigeria's, well, pretty fragile economy. He joins us now. Mr. Sanusi Lamido, you've had two major threats to the stability of Nigeria, which have been underlined in the few days of this new year. Indeed, on New Year's Day itself came the announcement of the reduction in all subsidies in terms of petrol and so on, which cost a great deal to the people of Nigeria. Would it have been better to do that, do you think, in stages, or to get it all over with a bad blow quickly?
Well, I think a number of considerations must have been in the mind of the president. First of all, I always explain that the subsidy in Nigeria was not really a subsidy. It was what I'd call a hedge. I mean, a subsidy is when the government pays 20 or 30% of the price of a product. But in the case of Nigeria, what the government said was Nigerians would not pay more than 65 naira per litre for fuel. Now, what that meant was that irrespective of what the price of oil was and what the exchange rate was, the government had an almost unlimited supply of money. Meanwhile, there were no revenue arrangements to compensate for increases in the price. So you fix a price when oil price internationally was $50 a barrel. Oil price has since doubled, exchange rates have moved, and the sheer amount of the subsidy keeps increasing. Plus, it's a system that was fraught with fraud and corruption because it offered arbitrage opportunities for people to actually buy fuel, sell in neighboring countries, and claim the subsidy within from our resources. So the urgency for the president was the global environment, the Euro crisis. We have reserves of $30 billion. We don't have any buffers in the event of a crash in the price of oil, and the president felt it was important to remove huge areas of drain on resources so as to prepare the country in the event of a crisis. So we're not dealing with an emergency at the moment, but the president, I think, and this was our view as well as the economic team, realized that we have to prepare. On the other incident, tragic incidents in Kano, it's basically a very extreme form of violence that has been going on over a long time, and it's a source of concern.
And in fact, Boko Haram and so on, who are blamed for these figures, I mean, it's over 1,000 deaths in a relatively short period of time, isn't it?
Yes, and we really don't know who Boko Haram is, and we don't know if it's a ragtag group in the northeast or if it's other people that are doing this and claiming to be Boko Haram. I think the sad thing about it is that anybody can just pick up a phone and say we are Boko Haram, and nobody can tell us who is Boko Haram, what are their headquarters, what are their modus operandi, and I think the frightening thing is how little we seem to know about who is actually doing these things.
How can you find out?
Well, I suppose there's got to be a lot of work on the intelligence side as far as security services are concerned. But we also need to address the root causes of some of these issues. Boko Haram is one stage. We had criminals and militants in the Niger Delta blowing up oil wells, kidnapping people. We've had these bouts of violence in Jos, in Kaduna, in Zangon Kataf. And I think the reality is that we have built a society in which the economy has been growing, but over 90% of the population is very poor. So there is a tremendous amount of frustration and misery all over the country. And once you've got that pool, that reservoir of poverty and frustration, then there is a strong likelihood for people to tap into it and radicalize youth.
And in fact, I mean, do you think that Boko Haram was created by these crises, in fact? Was a response to these crises?
Well, that's been my personal view. I think if you go back to 2000, and I did present a paper on this, in 2000, Borno State, which is where Boko Haram started, was already the poorest state in Nigeria. And if you looked at every human development indicator, that state was actually poorer than Chad and Niger and Cameroon if it was a country on its own. Now, in that kind of environment, it is extremely easy to tap into that reservoir of poverty, of frustration, of a lack of future. I mean, by every indicator, if you talk about infant mortality, childhood enrollment, adult literacy, life expectancy, per capita income, maternal death at childbirth, Borno was nowhere on the map. And this is really why it presented a very ripe environment for the nurturing of this kind of mindset.
Could the government be doing more?
The government does need to very clearly and in very strong terms address the concerns of Nigerians on the issues of corruption in the oil sector and actually bring people to book.
It's really got to tackle that.
It's got to tackle that, and I think if it doesn't tackle that, there will remain a very strong trust deficit. But I think on the subsidy itself, what we need to do is communicate more and communicate better. The economic logic is compelling for removing it. Any huge differential between the price of oil in Nigeria and the price of oil in neighboring countries simply creates an opportunity for rent seeking. Now we've got to find other ways of providing palliatives and addressing the safety nets for the poor, but the subsidy regime is not sustainable. On Boko Haram, there's got to be, I think, a long-term effort to address poverty, to address education, and the political leadership itself needs to have a more nationalistic approach.
Is there any danger with the divisions between north and south and so on in various areas in Nigeria? Is there any danger of civil war in Nigeria?
I don't think there's a danger of civil war, but I think there is a very strong danger of a continuing level of these pockets of violence that end up making the environment generally insecure and that do have other consequences. And I think by far the greater responsibility for this lies with the political class. We have a political elite in Nigeria that presents itself not as a Nigerian leadership, but as a representative of certain segments of the country. I mean, our presidential elections in 2011 were conducted on the basis of whether the president should come from the north or the south. And there are people who still see, oh, the president is from the Niger Delta, the vice president is from the northwest. Nobody sees the leadership itself as Nigerian. So there is a responsibility on the part of politicians to realize the danger of this overemphasis on divisive ethnic and religious identities. And we've got all these groups. You've got Niger Delta Elders, you've got Arewa Consultative Forum, you've got Afenifere, you've got the Christian Association of Nigeria, Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, and all of these groups are populated by so-called elite who stress differences rather than national issues. And these are all, this consensus needs to be built on how we structure public discourse, and that is going to be part of the solution.
And in fact, President, Mr. Goodluck said, quote, just recently, "The situation we have in our hands is even worse," this is in terms of law and order, you know, "is even worse than the civil war that we fought." That's a pretty frightening problem.
Well, it is. I mean, if you, in a situation where you don't know who the enemy is,
yes,
and what you don't know what the agenda is, yeah, and you have a problem. And when you don't know where the next attack is going to be, I mean, is this a group that's fighting for social equality? Is it a group that's fighting for succession? Is it a group that's nobody knows? And in fact, is there such a group that is homogeneous, or is it just names that have been borrowed?
That really is a mega priority for the president in terms of today, to really tackle that problem.
I think that would be the #1 priority for the president, and it's a very difficult position to be in. It's always good to think about foreign policy and economic policy and development when you have security. But to deal with the situation in which your citizens are being killed every day and to be working towards finding a solution, it's a very difficult place to be.
Well, no pun intended, we wish you good luck as you approach this problem over the next days, and we look forward to talking again with your very clear analysis of what it is that faces Nigeria by way of a problem at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. From Nigeria to Egypt. This week marks the first anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution, where thousands of citizens, irrespective of religion or political orientation, took to the streets across Egypt. They were united in their demands for freedom, democracy, and the end of almost 30 years of Hosni Mubarak's rule. Now, a year later, and after a round of elections which saw Islamist parties come to power, the people of Egypt have returned to Tahrir Square. While some are celebrating the end of the Mubarak regime again, many more are protesting against the pace of change since then and questioning why so many of their demands appear to me unmet. Joining me now is the Egyptian ambassador to the United Kingdom, Ambassador Saif El Nasr. Welcome, Your Excellency. Great to have you with us this morning.
It's great to be here.
So you came here as ambassador, an appointment of Hosni Mubarak in that time, and now, of course, the regime is very different. Is your life very different from the Mubarak days to the later days?
Well, Egypt has changed. It's less important how I personally feel about it here, but I think it's we as diplomats, we are more or less akin to civil servants. So we work for the state, actually. It is the state of Egypt that we work for. And yes, every high official had to be appointed by the head of state, so that's normal. My life, I think the Egyptian community here has taken very positively to the changes in Egypt, and this is an important part of my work. And of course, Britain has been, taken very positively to the changes in Egypt since day one, and the Prime Minister has gone to Egypt, first foreign leader to go to Egypt.
So do you think, in fact, there has been real progress since the new march took over? I mean, has there been progress since they're back in Tahrir Square this week, of course?
Yes.
But has there been real progress yet, do you think?
Well, I think the nature of revolutions is that it's a process, and revolutions are always, the expectations outpace the outcome, of course. But what I really think is that we have done quite a bit. We have now an elected parliament, the one chamber of the parliament. We are doing the next election of the second parliament, our House of Lords, but elected. And we're going in the process of drafting a new constitution. And by July 1st, mark this date, we will have a new civilian president. So, a big part of the infrastructure for democracy is going to be there by the 1st of July. So
1st of July, that will be the key date of a new...
Absolutely.
A new leader, as it were.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, in terms of progress in the future, what is the most important thing that Egypt has to do now, do you think? I mean, it's bringing democracy to people who haven't taken it in before and so on, but I mean, are the policies working at the moment?
Well, of course there are impediments, but let's look at the positive side. The Egyptians are feeling for the first time in their history of ownership. They feel responsible, and they are, since they own the country now, they feel that they are responsible for its well-being. So it's a great empowerment that was instilled in the population. Of course, there are economic challenges. In any revolution, there are so many pivotal points to navigate until we reach the full you know, application of everything we wanted. But we're getting there.
Yeah. And are people in general, do you think, happier than they were under Hosni Mubarak? Are you happier now?
Well, as an Egyptian, you know, after a year, we feel this sense of pride and ownership. I think every Egyptian feels this. Almost every Egyptian feels this. Of course, some worry about the economic livelihood and so on, but this is something that will be, I think, tackled. But the main thing is that we look at the big picture. This is a new country where most Egyptians feel that the best moments for Egypt still lie ahead of her. We felt for a long time that there was this glass ceiling. We did not live up to our full potential socially, economically, politically. And Egypt, you know, Egyptians are very proud of their country and they feel it could do much better.
So that's where they stand at the moment, you think?
Yeah, that's my feeling.
So that the revolution is not over, but the revolution is not yet complete.
That's a statement of fact, of course, as most revolutions are. Not in a year. A year is a short time, but we are on the right track. I think. I really think we're on the right track.
Well, that's very interesting to hear. And of course, I mean, the challenge of a revolution and being an ambassador from one regime to another, that's pretty demanding too.
Well, I think it is. Yeah, it has been.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. We're going to return to the topic of Egypt in a few minutes, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sir David.
This week, as we've been hearing, we see Egyptians both celebrate the one-year anniversary of their revolution and protest about the lack of progress since then. As experts rush to count the losses and gains of the revolutions in the region, Marwan Bishara argues that in doing so they're missing the point about the historic transformations sweeping through the region. Instead, he argues in his new book that regardless of the barriers and setbacks, the decisive break with the past has been made, and the genie has now left the proverbial bottle. Well, joining me now to discuss his new book, The Invisible Arab, The Promise and Peril of the Arab Revolution, is the author, the key member of the Al Jazeera family and Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, Marwan Bishara. You've seen him here, you see him every month, and it's great to welcome you now.
Thank you.
Tell me, the point we were just making there, what is the shape of the genie that's out of the bottle?
Well, we've been living for decades now, 5, 6, 7 decades, depending on which Arab nations we're talking about, under dictatorships. And those dictatorships came in all sorts of forms. Some of them were slightly religious, some conservative, some totally secular, some totalitarian, some authoritarian. But in the end of the day, all of them autocrats, repressive regimes. In so many ways, the Arabs have, after accumulating a number of struggles throughout the years, have revolted throughout the region. They broke the barrier of fear. They have changed autocrats in several Arab countries. They are head-to-head, almost bone-breaking in the likes of Syria and Yemen and so on and so forth. So in so many ways, there is no return, David, to the days of repressive dictatorships, as we've seen them the last half a century.
But could there be some of the revolutions, there's worries about some of them, obviously, like Egypt, whether it is progressing and so on. Could, in fact, you say the genie can't be put back in the bottle and so on, or toothpaste back in the tube or whatever. Yes. But is there a possibility that they might retrench some of these, might go back to the authoritarian regime they had before because of dissonance?
I think a break with the past as we knew it, those post-colonial authoritative regimes, that is over. We could slip or escalate or find ourselves in the Arab world, yes, in sometimes perhaps even a more terrible situation, chaos, tyranny, and what have you, but it won't be what we've seen before. So a break with the past has happened. Now, some people are worried, and for a good cause, that you might have in the likes of Egypt, where now some 70% of the vote is Islamists, conservative Islamists, find themselves in parliament, that this could perhaps lead to a theological state. I doubt that. I think even Islamists in our region now are in so many ways working under the pretext of the revolution, which is we want democracy, freedom, we want an exchange of government if we don't like them, we want to be able to change and displace you leaders whenever we don't want you. So there is still conservative voices and representatives and political parties in the Arab region, but they are all working under the understanding, in the context of a revolution that says no more repressive regimes.
No more repressive regimes. But there could be very Islamic regimes?
I think in the region we've tried, in the likes of Sudan, in the likes of Iran, we've tried theological or Islamist regimes. They failed in so many ways to really bring everything from services to human rights and progress to their nations. So what we have today is Islamists being political forces and political movements within their nations. But I actually think some of them are anchored in the past. Some of them will see themselves reformed and become anchored in the future. I sat down just recently with the head of the Islamist party in Egypt and the heads of the Islamist party in Tunisia, Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi. And my sense is, and that's what actually they tell me, is they could be seen like, David, like Christian Democrats, if you will. You know, just like Christian Democrats in the beginning part of the 20th century moved seriously to be anchored in religious, moral system of thinking, but go into politics. I think some of the Islamist party, like the Muslim Brotherhood or the Nahda party in Tunis, see themselves as reformist Islamist movement that accept the democratic rules of the game.
Is there any particular country that will be crucial to where the Arab Spring goes? I mean, is there...
No. I think it's very important, actually. I just came from Tunisia, I just came back from Tunisia, where I sense that there's an inspiration there for the rest of the Arab world. It's a country of 10 million, but inspired an entire region. So what goes on in Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Revolution, is important. And then what went on or what goes on in Egypt, the biggest Arab country, where sort of the center of Arab culture in so many ways. If what happens in Egypt will be remarkable in terms of what goes on in the region in general, because if Egypt fails, it's very difficult to see how the other Arab revolutions will succeed. But the most crucial one today, David, is Syria. Because North Africa, everywhere from Libya, Tunisia, even Morocco, Algeria, and so on and so forth, I think I can see progress there. Incremental, sometimes slow, sometimes in a zigzag, but I think you can see in the Arab nations of North Africa, they see progress. Syria is threatening to break up if 6,000 dead and counting continues to be the case, and the revolution moves or transforms itself into sectarian civil war type conflict that have a spillover effect to the rest of the region, to Lebanon, to Iraq, even to Jordan, and so on and so forth. So Egypt is really crucial to succeed, but a major failure in Syria, that would be disastrous to the Arab East.
Marwan, thank you very much for that rousing survey of the region. The book is called The Invisible Arab and includes a real matinee idol picture at the back of Marwan himself. Thank you very much indeed. Good luck with the book. Good luck with Empire.
Much appreciated.
Thanks a million. And I'm afraid that's it for this week. My thanks to all of my guests. Do join me again in 7 days' time for another Frost Over the World. Until then, goodbye for now.